Hey everyone, I'm Prez. Welcome back to Cabrillo. This is episode 12 already, and today we're moving away from the university, UC Cabrillo, that we've been working on for the last two episodes. Today we're going to be moving all the way across the river from downtown and working on the Second Skyline, which is a neighborhood I've alluded to before. But yeah, we're going to be working on this smaller plot of land in between the hillside and the ocean. The hillside's going to be very protected. We'll take a look at the geography I'm kind of aiming for there. But first, Inspiration Station. We're looking at False Creek, which is a neighborhood in Vancouver that is, very closely associated with Vancouverism, as it's called, which we'll discuss. One thing I want you to notice in False Creek here is how the buildings are actually pretty short. Just all of the buildings in Vancouver have to meet height limit design guidelines that preserve view corridors of the mountains behind them, which is, what makes Vancouver Skyline so special, because Vancouver is located in such a beautiful area, some of the best geography in the United States, and these Vancouverism districts are height restricted. Anyway, just before we move on, I want to show you my idea for the geography of what we're building. I'm kind of looking at this industrial area to the northwest of Portland and how it's sandwiched in between the Willamette River and Forest Park, and I'm kind of going for something like that. Obviously, there's no freeway going through here, but there was actually plans to be a freeway called the Industrial Freeway through that area in Portland, if you're not aware, but it was canceled. But here we do have a freeway, and we have a railroad main line along the waterfronts that's shared by BNSF, UP, and Amtrak. But so the waterfront's going to look different than it does in Portland, which, I like the way the waterfront looks here. It has been very well preserved over time, surprisingly, and that is just because the highway posed such a limit to the building of this industrial area. Our waterfront's gonna have a bike path, and you'll be able to cross over. It's a lot more natural than that waterfront I showed you in Portland. So what is Vancouverism? I feel like Wikipedia, as usual, will be able to explain this better than I can, so I'll read the definition out for you. Vancouverism is an urban planning and architectural phenomenon in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. It's characterized by a large residential population living within the city center, with mixed-use developments, typically with a medium-height commercial base and narrow, high-rise residential towers, significant reliance on mass public transit, creation and maintenance of green park spaces, and preserving view corridors. So yeah, there are a couple of different aspects here, and I think the first one I want to touch on is it's what's called point towers. Vancouver has these things called point towers, which are basically a wider commercial base for the first couple of floors, and then up above that it'll be a high-rise residential tower. But crucial to this, hand in hand with the view corridor point, is you have to preserve the view corridors. So the buildings are subject to a height limit; they can't be too high, and it just makes for a beautiful skyline, as I showed you earlier. But the height is also, usually people might associate really tall skyscrapers with windy streets and shadowy streets that are kind of overshadowed by something that's completely out of their scale, namely a stupidly tall skyscraper. The point towers really help solve that by putting, kind of having a much skinnier tall section, and they create a much more human-scaled streetscape. New York kind of had regulations, I believe, that way before Vancouver kind of had point tower type buildings where you'd have a base that is a lot wider than the bulk of the building. And that was just because I believe in New York it was kind of the same kind of concerns, except without the view corridor concerns as much, more just shadows and winds. As far as I'm aware, at least, I'm not as educated on New York there, but other than that, it's really just making sure that the population's living in a dense area, but that they have the same kind of green space that they would expect in a like a suburb. Like in a suburb, you move there for, it's the Garden City ideal. Ebenezer Howard, you move there because it has green space, and you've bridged the divide between city and country. Well, the idea with Vancouverism, and really honestly a lot of other urban design that's maybe goes hand in hand with Vancouverism, is that you could have all of that natural space within the city center. And here, what we're building with Second Skyline, it is definitely what I'd call second wave aspirational Vancouverism, in that the planners in Cabrillo in the 2000s, kind of after Vancouver had already done a lot of its work making its Vancouverism districts, the planners here were facing a pretty big housing shortage. And what they did is they had this huge swath of industrial land that was kind of in decline, and there was not much use for it as much. So they kind of took this swath of lands and really worked within the existing road layout, maybe altering a couple of roads, but you'll notice that the road layout looks like plausible, like a plausible road layout that you might see in an industrial area. Part of it's been cut out for new on and off ramps from the freeway, which, by the way, this is the Interstate 905 freeway. It's basically a spur off of the 5 that goes up into Cabrillo through a valley in Mendocino County. And thanks to the Discord folks, the folks over in my Discord, for kind of helping me figure out a suitable number for this freeway, because I don't actually think a 905 exists in real life. I know there's a 905 in San Diego, but I don't think it's actually an interstate. So I'm kind of imagining here that our Second Skyline district, once again, the name for this area, it's not as Vancouver-y as Vancouver. It's a place where planners and architects applied some of the design principles of Vancouver and looked at the history of False Creek, where it was industrial before and was transformed into a mixed-use, beautiful area with tons of green space. And then they came in here and built the area up like that, but within the constraints of a city that was a little less convinced of cycling and transit as the ultimate alternative to cars. So you've got that huge arterial going through there. There will be a bus line that goes there, probably some sort of rapid bus, but there's also a light rail line that was built after the bulk of the district was Vancouverized, and that's kind of along the highway is where the alignment for that is. And that line is going to go directly into downtown. It's only a couple stops over here, but I'm imagining that we can have a vote in the future on whether to expand it further down the river. You'll also notice that I'm mixing in some older buildings that I'm imagining were warehouses that were converted into, well, some of them have been converted, some of them not quite yet. So, converted into bars and, microbreweries and stuff like that. And just cool places that kind of preserve the industrial aesthetic of the district. And there's some areas that are more so like that than others here. And I'm just really imagining that those places are either going to be beautified or phased out over time, but that Cabrillo's less far along than Vancouver is in its own Vancouverization here. So you're going to see a lot more remnants of the old districts, like road layout, stuff like that, than you might in Vancouver's False Creek and stuff. Anyway, it definitely leave me some comments on it. If you're from Vancouver, I've never been there. Let me know how I did, and just obviously remember the constraints of Cabrillo planners. Were not quite doing the exact same thing as Vancouver. They're just taking cues from it. I think I did a pretty good job, and I'm not even lying. I think I took like 4 days of multiple hours in game to get this video done. It took a long time to record this. And that's just because I really wanted to be precise with both, remembering that this place was previously industrial, and then also having this huge arterial go through and have a coherent road layout that makes sense, both historically and design-wise. So it took a while, and then also I placed every single building by hand, no zoning today, and I had to also deal with some weird tight freeway interchanges, a weird light rail alignment that is just there because it's cheap, and the city was able to expand the system cheaply that way, rather than building I'm imagining there might have been political constraints because this place, so, the people here are a little more attached to their cars than they are in Vancouver, just because they're on this huge corridor. It's a little easier to drive around into Cabrillo on this road that used to just be a huge artery for industrial traffic. They've got the bones of a auto-centric area, unfortunately. So the city was not able to get the political will to muster the political will to put the light rail right on the middle of the arterial with traffic signal priority and stuff like that. So they just settled for putting it by the freeway. But the areas since has been upzoned enough where even the areas close to the freeway are completely Vancouverized, and they look beautiful and new and high density. Another thing is, view corridor wise, I wasn't exactly needing to preserve the views of the mountains because these buildings aren't tall enough to make that a huge problem, especially because on the other side of the river, you're not really going to be anywhere other than on the top of the hill because it's kind of a gorge in there. But yeah, this area has been so successful that the city of Cabrillo is facing an even worse housing shortage now, which is both due to a wider trend in California, but also it was almost this district was almost a victim of its own success, and now it's just time to muster more political will to upzone other areas within Cabrillo, because here at Second Skyline, it's a very desirable district, and a lot of people have been priced out who might have initially lived here, and it's the rents are increasing significantly just because the views are so ridiculous, and the transit access is so good, and it's been retrofitted a little bit more to handle walkability and bikeability. So yeah, kind of a victim of its own success, but all that really means is that you need to upzone other areas and just continue upzoning, because that just means there's demand for this kind of density. Another interesting thing I wanted to discuss, which is kind of unrelated to this, but it's related to this demand for transit and walkability, is really that these places that are walkable, that are bikeable, that are healthy urban places are in high demand right now, and really cities have to upzone and allow for higher density in order to accommodate that. Otherwise, people are going to get priced out. And another interesting thing is that there's this trend of some people who are living in the city for convenience, who aren't necessarily urban pioneers, kind of moving back to the suburbs, whether they lived there before or maybe lived there before with family. Now they're moving to the suburbs because they can get more space and it's cheaper if they're able to do remote work. That's a trend that's been happening throughout the country. And people are talking about this as this mass urban exodus. I kind of think of it a little bit more as a reset, where you're redistributing the demand a little bit more efficiently to people who really want to be in the city, either for job opportunities or just being, that kind of urban pioneer mentality that I was talking about before, that maybe a lot of you can relate to, wanting to live in a city. Whether it's small or medium sized, just the livability of a city is in high demand by a lot of people. But it's interesting to see that now that people are able to work a little more remotely, that's resetting a little bit, where certain people who were in the city for other reasons are leaving now, and maybe freeing up a little bit of a little bit of space for others. But that's not a reason not to upzone. We seriously need to be upzoning places, and you notice all of these dynamics happening in the Bay Area, for example. A lot of people are questioning the future of San Francisco as a job center. I don't really think it's going anywhere, but maybe a lot of other downtown areas are going to have an interesting reset, where there are multi-day a week commuters from the suburbs who kind of come in, but otherwise there's a new population in urban centers. I don't know. Let me know what you think about all that, because I think it's just a really interesting time in human geography in the United States, just now that we have this whole remote work paradigm. And I'm just wondering what you think it's going to do for our cities, and whether it's going to be good or bad, or what we might be able to do to make it end in a favorable way, if that makes sense. Another thing I'd love for you to let me know in the comments is if you would live either in Vancouver or in our little Vancouverism district of Second Skyline here, because for me, it's kind of a mixed bag in that Vancouver is Vancouver's a beautiful place, and it no doubt has amazing urban design, and just beyond the affordability problem that it's created as a victim of its own success. There is this argument, and I think City Beautiful put this very well in his video, which I'll link in the description, about Vancouverism. You're kind of bringing the suburbs to the city. The sterility of the suburbs comes to the city in these Vancouverism districts, and you kind of see that here in Cabrillo in this district. I don't know what a good alternative is in terms of making this district livable, but there is an argument to be made, and I really think it might be down to personal preference, what people want. I mean, it does allow a lot of families to maybe live in a city who might not otherwise live in a place like that. And yeah, this is kind of what it looks like from above. If you go down on ground level, I've actually added some freeway signs that show this is the 905 East. There's an exit sign for Pullman Street. And I'm just trying to add those details. Even though it's a small detail, I really think it makes a big difference. You also notice that we have townhouses that are human scaled on the streets here, just so that it feels like you're walking, and also just smaller commercial buildings, so it feels like you're in a human scaled area that's not completely out of your comfort zone. There's also this bike path along the waterfront that I just love. I would love to ride on this. There are only like 2 access points from the Second Skyline here. We've also got this light rail stop. We put 3 in this episode. This one, I forget which one it is, but it's right along the freeway. We also have, areas that haven't been completely Vancouverized yet, where there might be warehouses that were torn down and just replaced with smaller commercial buildings. This is what the skyline looks like in relation to, the other side of the gorge. I think I preserved view corridors pretty well here. Another thing you'll notice is that I placed a bunch of bike paths that are one way on each side of the street. I saw something like this in Vancouver where it was like raised on the sidewalk, basically. So it's the part of the sidewalk's been converted into bike infrastructure. And I just thought it was really cool. You can see the Amtrak train coming along there. I love that. I think we did a great job this episode. I love Second Skyline. Once again, though, would you live here? You think it's too sterile? Do you think it's too boring, or is it livable for you? Is it, would you sacrifice maybe some interesting locations within your neighborhood for just the insane views that you might get from these apartments? Just let me know what you think here, and just leave your feedback in the comments. Before we go, just wanted to give some quick shout outs to some light rail and high-speed rail tier patrons: Dishon, Alex Valdez, Jade Schuyler, Dude Meister, and Stan Schroeders. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel over on Patreon. If you're interested in downloading Cabrillo's save game, maybe taking a look at Second Skyline yourself, I know we went over it pretty quickly, or anything in the city, just download the save game over on Patreon. You can get tons of other benefits over there as well, like early access to videos, and you can get benefits as well by becoming a YouTube member, or if you just want to support me, you can do that, or leave a comment, or whatever works for you. I don't care. I'm just glad you watched so long. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of Cabrillo.